No, we'll just do some intros and then.
Okay.
Cool. So I think we're actually live now, which is good. So finally, uHangout is back after a long hiatus. So it's good to be back. And today I have Fillip and Rene on. How are you both?
Hi. Hi. Good.
Good. So as always, on these things, we do kind of like a brief introduction. So we'll take you, Rene, with a mouthful of water. How did you get involved with Umbraco?
How did I get involved? Actually, for I think it was 7 or 8 years ago, we had our own CMS, and I got a little stuck on board with it. So I took a look at Umbraco, and I just stuck to it ever since. And so are we here at the Scribble where I work. So we use Umbraco now.
Awesome. So that was what, 7, 8 years ago? You said?
Yeah, I think so.
So a long time Umbraco user.
Yeah.
XSLT days.
Oh yes.
Oh yes.
Remember those?
Good. Fillip, yourself, how'd you get involved with Umbraco and kind of the Umbraco world?
He's not.
I'm not that much involved anymore. I used to work here with René at Scribble, and this is where I got involved with the community and got to know everybody and got to work with Umbraco. But now I'm on a competing .NET framework. So I'm sorry about that.
No, you can leave now.
But at least if I say I still prefer Umbraco, is that okay?
Awesome. So, but your background is more from a front end perspective, or?
I hardly ever do any code that runs on the server.
Okay. And I suppose you're the total opposite, René? More code on the server and little front end.
Yeah.
Cool.
So actually this spare thing, Fillip started it on the front end, and then he came with a shitload of requests for how can we do this and how could we feed with data and stuff like that. So that's how it started.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Let's just jump straight in. You've come quite formal today. We have slides. We have slides.
Sorry.
It's fine.
So we're trying here.
I'm gonna let you try and give the title. So how we decided how we're pronouncing this now?
We agreed we should do this.
I think there was something Ravi pronouncing on Twitter, and maybe he's the man who should pronounce it.
We should all just tag him on Twitter and ask him how it's pronounced.
Yeah.
That's a video of it.
It's something like Spangle Umbraco.
I like that. I like that one. Spangular Umbraco.
Yeah.
So we'll go for that.
Yeah.
So what we want to talk about is how we make a single-page application with Angular on the front end and Umbraco on the back end. So we'll just quickly go through. We have some slides with some code on it, and then after that maybe we should show a demo up front, maybe.
Yeah.
Well, so just to get started, as a single-page application, if somebody should know, is like instead of traditional websites where every time you go to a new site, you hit the server and it'll serve you everything you need, all the HTML and all the resources over again, and you'll get a blank screen on your browser while the new site is loading and all that stuff. Yep. This is where this all happens in the browser, and we can just ask the server for just the content that changed. So that's just to get it out of the way. So we thought we would just show the solution we just made, or maybe half a year ago or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see this as well?
Yeah, no, I see it.
Perfect. So this is just an example of a website. It's a little bit funny website, but you see how the page, this actually is a page transition, but see how the URL is updated, and we can get nice transitions. So if you go to a separate site, you will get transitions and do animations and all that stuff. So we can so the user will get a better experience of what happens. So that's just from the user's point. They'll have a little bit faster website typically because we don't have to ship so much data over the wire.
Yep.
And we can start doing the animation as soon as you click, and then just wait for the data to show up until we actually show the new page. So for the user's perspective, it's just a better user experience. So that's the primary reason to do it. And then of course it's a lot of fun, and it allows us to do stuff. So you do it because we can have transitions, and we do it also for performance reasons. We can preload a lot of stuff. So like we have pages where we say, so typically the user will go to this page afterwards, and we can preload that into our cache, because since it's all in the same front end session all the time, we can manually like control what's in the cache. So we can preload, and we don't have to pass everything all the time. So one of the big challenges is that even though we like minify our JavaScript and do all that stuff, we still have to pass everything over and over every time we reload the page. But in the Spark context, we don't have to do that because it's already passed. We can only send the divs, and of course we can handle caching somehow.
But also this also means small problems if you cast, for example, the JavaScript files once, and maybe you do a new deploy. Then you have this cache invalidation thing, but we'll get into that later.
Yeah, we'll talk about that later, but that is a funny question, because like if you don't handle that, you could imagine somebody going on vacation and coming back 2 weeks later and then just clicking around, and they're still in the same session and they still have all the same resources and all that stuff. But even though all the content has changed, and maybe there's a new template and all that stuff, so we have a way to handle this, but it's a funny problem. So we have like on the client side, there's you can either do just as like a very simple and kind of naive approach where you serve up everything up front, and that can work if the page never change and if it's relatively small. But typically you want something that's a little more advanced, where everything's dynamic and you can have dynamic pages with dynamic templates and dynamic navigation and all that stuff. So that's what we're going to show. So for the front end that we'll show today, we've been using Angular, but all of these can really, like the approach could work with any other front end that we see. But in Angular 1, the go-to router for everybody, I think, is the UI router. And if you're used to Angular and you don't know the UI router, that's probably weird. But if you don't, the difference is that we deal with states instead of URLs. So you don't have to have a URL for everything. So we can. That's one of the things we take advantage of. So we have just a generic state that's hit every time, no matter what the URL is, and then we can then send a request to the server and get the real data for the actual site. So we only have, it's a spoiler, I know, but the way we've done it is that there's only one state that's hit every time. But just to get started, the very simple approach. Can you see the code? Is it big enough?
Yeah, no, it's big enough. It's nice and easy to read.
Perfect. So this is just the 101 of the UI router in Angular. So if you take a look at line 5 and 6, well, we've injected the state provider, and we give it a state that's called home. We say this is when the URL is /home, and you should render this template that says welcome home. And the same goes for about us. And I mean, if you have a really, really simple site, you could just map out all of this in advance, and you can even make Umbraco spit all of this out for you. But it doesn't really work if you have pages that have thousands of sites. Or
the user wants to create a new.
If the user creates pages and edits them while there are users on the site, it doesn't work. But this is where we're coming from. This is the traditional approach, and the URL or the markup is really simple. So the thing to notice is the line 4 where you put in a base tag. Not everybody knows this, I figured, but the base tag is a way to say you should count all, like when the browser figures out where resources should be fetched from, you use this base href as the base position to calculate the path from. So because we actually change what's in the URL field, and we don't want all the resources to break, we have to say every time the resource is required, you should get it from the root of the application.
Okay, that makes sense.
And then line 7 is just a regular body tag, and then some Angular specific stuff where you actually boot up Angular, but that's not important for now. And then the magic is in line 10, where you put in a UI view, and that's where the browser, or that's where the Angular will actually spit in the real content that changes from side to side. Line 9 is just some default navigation where you say that you can route directly to a state. So you see this is not URLs, these are states. So you route to a state, and then the router, because it knows what state has what URL, it'll actually make a real link, so you can right click and say a new window, or you can send the link to somebody or something. So that's just basic how routing's done. And this is the same whether you go with the naive approach or the more advanced approach. So the in-between step, I don't want to go through all this code, because this is not really what's important. But the in-between stage is just saying you can have some part of your URL, like in line 2, you see there's a colon, and then what's after the colon in the URL is like a parameter. So like the example here is you do /random /something or /5 or something, and you'll pass this into a function that you can then do something based on. And here you'll ask some API for something, but that's not really important for now. What's really the little bit more complex solution is this, where we see we've made the generic state that we call root, and we say everything that's like the URL : stars path.
So is that matching everything?
Yes, that matches all routes, all possible routes.
Okay.
So every time there's a new navigation,
API.
Come again?
Yeah, so you're always pinging an API, looking at that code. So
Yes.
on line 5, you're doing a HTTP GET based on the path that you send.
Yeah. So this is not the actual implementation layer. As you can see, it says PHP somewhere in the middle, but that's just for a quick demo. But the point is that we have, like in the resolve section of this, from line 3 to line 13, is where you can do all the stuff that goes on while the route is changing. So here we get the content from the server, and we also, and then in the preload phase, we can preload assets if there's any assets called in the reply from the server that's called preload. We'll preload all of these, so that way we can actually avoid the weird stuff where you load an image up top and it starts off with not being there, and then when it's all loaded, all the content jumps because the image is already there, or it's there. So we get around this by preloading the most important assets, or maybe the assets that's about to fold, if you want to say that. And then we have a very generic controller that really doesn't do anything except taking the data from the fetch request and putting it on the controller, so you can get to it from the template. And then instead of giving it a template, in line 19 you see that we actually instantiate a template provider instead, so we can pass it a function, and that function will be invoked every time with the response from the fetch. So that way we can actually say, so give us the template value from the fetch request from the server, and use that to figure out what template should be used.
So fetch.template is the actual name of the template which you
Yes.
Okay.
So fetch, line 20, which says fetch.template. Fetch is the response that comes from the server, and template is the name in the JSON array that we get.
Yeah, okay. Property.
Yeah. So the reason why we do an HTTP GET there as well is because the template provider needs to have a string or something that resolves to a string, so we'll just ask the server to get the actual template. Of course, in the real life world, and in what we showed before, all of this is cached as well, and it's already in the client, so we don't ask the server for the template, and we also cache the fetch request to the server. So if you go back to a page that you've already been to, we don't have to ask the server again. But this is just to keep it kind of simple and show off how it works.
Yep.
So I'll hand it over to René, and he'll talk about the Umbraco.
We'll get a little more Umbraco specific. So Philip made this Spade frontend, and we had to connect it with Umbraco because that's what we use normally. And we have a little discussion about what do we need. And these 4 things is the main thing that I want to show right now. There's a lot of other stuff, but this is good for now to just grab the how to do it. So there's 3 APIs one for fetching navigation, one for fetching content, and one for fetching settings for the whole site. So settings is normally just something you put in a JavaScript object in the start view. The first page that you hit when a user gets to your site, it gives you a start template, which I will show you later. It's what I call initial template. And the settings object is just serialized as a JSON object. So that's the settings that we normally just use once or on every page, so we don't have to load them again. And the navigation stuff is, of course, for navigation, and the content stuff is all the data and properties from each document type. Then we have to use Umbraco to give us some cache invalidation. So if you, as I said earlier, use some new, deploy some new JavaScript files, or maybe your editor creates new pages or deletes pages and stuff like that, we have two invalidations, which I will always show later. And then we have the initial template, and if that's an optional thing, but if you want to use Umbraco Grid, we have to make it into objects and then serialize it later. But I'll show you. Here's an example, a little just example code for how to do the navigation. We have a navigation API controller, which inherits from Umbraco API. And you can put a node ID and levels as params. And line 16 is just to when we do it here at Scribble, we have the server in Azure, and the front ender he's asking the API from his domain, local domain, and if you put this access control at our origin, he can fetch that. Otherwise, he couldn't.
Yep, that makes sense.
Yep, and then we return the navigation items in line 20, and that's just that. And you can make you'll see I have made my own model for this navigation item, and you can make it as you want. But we have some sample code later that you can go look at.
So is that object sending anything interesting back? Is it just an ID, the name of the file, or what's in that model?
Yeah, normally it's the URL and the name and the title and maybe the teaser text and stuff like that. What you need for your navigation. Normally it's just an ID, and does it have children or does it not have children and stuff like that?
Yeah, because we added the levels option because we want to, like, if we have to render the navigation based on this, we have to have some kind of idea of how the sitemap looks, but we don't want, like, if it's a massive page, we don't want to download the entire sitemap before we can show something. So we'll, like, the way we usually kick it off is like we in the settings array that we get in the initial load, we'll get like a root ID or something, or a node, like a root node ID.
Normally we do the main navigation like a multi-node tree picker at the backend. And then we just put the IDs of the multi-node tree picker out in CSV, and then Fillip or the front end gets the nodes and the main navigation.
So we have the idea that it can have children, and then there's a property that's called has children, that's either true or false, and then you can optionally feed in the children if you have levels, if you have more than one level. So that's how it works, like, recursively. So then there's some magic going on in Angular that asks, so if you're trying to build a multi-level like navigation thing, and it sees pages with that has subpages, but you don't know the subpages, it'll automatically ask the server again and all that stuff.
Okay, nice.
Yeah. And then a little more exciting, the content API, which also inherits from Umbraco API controller, and we decorated with the HTTP GET. And then you just Angular sends call the API and sends the URL, and then we just use get by route to get the actual content. And we also check for is there content or not, and if it's not, then we return a 404, and the spec takes over and shows 404 site, or whatever we want to do. And starting from line 33, we just look at what document type is it, and then if it's like here a front page, we do we serve the front page content, and if it's a sub page, we do it with the sub page, and then so on, depending on how many doc types you have.
Okay.
So we're actually doing our own controllers and our own models.
Yep.
To get this working. Yeah. So what to do about the cache? We have to invalidate cache when, as I said earlier, you're deploying new JS files or content is being deployed or unpublished or whatever for whatever reason. And how do we do it? We use two watchers. One is a file watcher and the other one is a content watcher. So all our JavaScript assets are in one folder, and we are just looking at this folder, and when the content changes, I send a new GUID out to the spec, to the front end, and the front end just reloads the whole page, and then we have loaded the new JS files.
Yeah. So it's kind of like almost like hashing the file. So whenever there's a file change, because we need to actually run the new JavaScript, we actually need it to be passed again, so we'll actually reload the page.
Okay, so you're doing some kind of comparison against the old ID and the new ID?
Yes. Yeah. So on every request that goes back and forth, so every time the user clicks something and asks any of the APIs, or at least the content API, I'm not sure.
The content API.
So whenever there's a new content API request, the new GUID is sent along, and I'll compare that to the old GUID, and if there's a difference, we'll reload the page.
Yeah.
So the user might end up in a place where they throw if there's a user online when there is a new deploy, he might see a traditional refresh instead of an animated refresh. But I mean it's still better than doing old stuff.
Yeah. No, I'm not seeing the right content.
Yeah.
And the content watcher actually does have the same approach with the GUID, but instead of reloading the page, the front end just clears the navigation cache, so it all works again.
So file watcher, I presume that's something that's just sitting traditionally on the server, that's just monitoring the folder?
Yeah.
And the content watcher, is that Umbraco events that you've hooked up?
Yeah. Yeah, we look into different events and then change the GUID. I'll actually have an example here for the assets watcher. It's just a file system watcher, and we put it to look at the script folder. And every time there's a change, we set on line 90 the new global variable called JS change GUID. And then the front end looks at it, and actually we can see it here. Is that the one? Yeah. Here we no, this one. Then all the models we have, they inherit from master model, and on all models then we have content change GUID property and JS change GUID property, and then the front end gets those.
Nice.
Yeah. Very
nice. Yeah, that's a nice way to solve the problem.
Yeah, and a nice and easy way. And actually, just what I wanted to show here is that we register those watchers in the IE application started.
Yes, the Umbraco kind of application boot.
Yeah. Yep. And then the templating, because all the templating actually is handled by Angular, but the Umbraco has to serve one template, and it could look like this. The only thing that we have to make sure of is the base ref that Fillip told about.
Yep.
And the title. Actually, there's no title now, but normally we would do a title so that when Google indexes the site, it has the main title before the Angular takes over.
Yeah.
And then very important stuff is line 12 and line 25 is the cache buster. We have made a method, an extension method for the HTML, which will put a new number afterwards the file name, so that when you do a reload, it will and the file is new, it will have a new number, and the file will load in the client. Yeah. And then there's the UI view where the front end goes, and that's actually all there is to it.
So the render body, as you've got no child templates is not actually rendering anything.
Actually, it's something to have to do with that. All the when we do a new doc type and a new template, we just make an empty template with the name of the template that the front end wants to make, so that we can I can actually show line 63. Sorry, template name is the content template alias plus the .html.
So it's just kind of a hack so that the editor from Umbraco can choose can choose a template, and that will be passed on to Angular even, so we'll know what.
So we don't do any templating in Umbraco besides this one, but all the others are empty templates. Just inherit the layout from here. So that's hence the render body stuff.
Yep, that makes sense.
Okay. So the optional stuff is if you want to do grid in a spec, you will have to make all the data as objects in C#, and then when you want to serve it to the front end, you have to serialize them again. So this is done by we use a package from Anders Bjerre. He had made a package called Scribble Micro Grid Data, and after that, it's a NuGet package you can install, and after that you make your grid JSON converter, or you use the one that we have in the sample code.
Mm-hmm.
And for each grid data type, are they called that grid data types? Yeah. Yeah. You have to make a grid value converter, so you can convert the JSON from the grid to an object.
Yep.
Yeah. And when you then put out the grid property from the documents, then you have to decorate the grid property so that the grid spec convert this spec grid JSON converter knows what to do with the property.
Okay. Yes. So it knows how to deserialize it or serialize it properly.
So we can move a lot of the stuff that's saved in the grid JSON, the normal Umbraco grid JSON, and just serve the data that we want.
Yep.
So actually, there's an example here. So we put it in sections and rows and areas, and inside the areas you see those controls.
Yep.
And those are grid value converters serialized, and all the other stuff is the spec JSON converter doing its job.
Nice.
So when we serve that to the front end, it handles it like that.
Yeah. So if you know Angular, how Angular templating works, this is more or less pretty basic. So we just kind of repeat over the sections, and then repeat over the rows, and then repeat over the areas.
Yep.
And then repeat over the controls in the area. And then, so the magic is in the very middle line, where we more or less just have a single template for every different grid type, kind of grid area, or the grid control, of course. Yeah. And we just have this is just implementation detail, but we just have a rule they're always in this folder, and they're always called the same as the grid and all that stuff. So that's a pretty basic thing. And so that way we know that from the template we can just access the data from the name that it's always called, and we can just put it out however we want to.
So that way it works a lot like the normal rendering if you use
yes. Yeah, it's very, very similar to the Razor rendering. You've got obviously this very basic looping to kind of render out your grid, and then you've got a component for each editor in the grid.
Exactly. Yeah, so typically what goes on in the control template is that for all the built-in controls in Umbraco, or the standard ones, like text and images and all that stuff, we more or less just render some HTML. But when we do our own stuff, we'll usually have some like a standalone component that just feeds the data, so you can use it like you traditionally do with Angular. Yep. And that's really why we want to do this on the client side and not just render HTML on the server and pass it along. We could do that, but that would make passing data to components to work with a lot harder. So this is a more flexible way, and it also this way all the templating lives on the client, and it's not like a mismatch and something's on the server and something's on the client.
It's actually there's also another more to gain here, because we don't have to. Normally, if we do a website, the front enders make front end and ship some HTML to the back enders, and we implements the views. But here we can just make a new grid element, and then the front ender can because of the API, can just make all the changes himself.
And it's very easy to fake along. So you saw how René put all those access headers on, so we can just we don't even run like an Umbraco installation on our local machine. We just go straight to the staging environment and ask there for all the data and ask that API out there.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, it works really easy, and it's just it's very convenient, and even though and then if we have to make a change and all of the backenders are busy, it's pretty easy to set up a proxy server in the middle on your machine and say whenever this request comes through, you can just change it a little bit before you ship it to your browser. Yeah. So it's pretty easy to work around, and we don't have to run to actually run the setup on our machine.
We also, if there's no backend when the front end starts, we install an empty Umbraco and do some empty doc types, and then put a debug property on, and then the front ender can put the JSON in that field, and then he can code what's in the JSON, and afterwards we can see, oh, he wants these and these properties, and then we can make them.
Yeah, perfect. It's a nice workflow between the front end development team and the back end coders.
You get on running pretty fast, and it's very flexible. Even so, if the one is available and the other one is not, we can still work.
Yeah, you're not blocking each other.
No, exactly. And we're in a small house, that could easily happen.
Yeah. So just one more thing before we end the presentation, and we get just to talking.
The enterprise.
Just a little word on animations. So animations are built into Angular now, so we can just so we put it's based on classes. So you saw how in the template that René showed here. No. Yeah, there's in line 17. There's a class name called View on the UI view in line 17, and that's what we hook into here. So in line 1, we say animation.view, and that way Angular knows that whenever something that's called .view is changed, you run this animation. And this you can do it if you're just doing really simple stuff, you can just do it with CSS. And that everybody that's played with Angular knows how to do that, because that's just adding a special class that's called something, and that will animate it for you.
Yep.
But sometimes we want to do stuff that's a little more complicated than that. If you the demo we showed before, where the bubbles gets bigger and they zoom down, and you scroll to the top and all that stuff, you can't really do that with just CSS animation. So this is just giving you some hooks. So now we have an enter and a leave hook that's called every time the view is changed. So what actually goes on is there's two views at the same time. So and one is entering and one is leaving, and then it's there until the done function is called. So we can say now this animation is complete, and you can tear down the old view and free up the memory from that. So that's it's just pretty basic stuff if you're used to Angular, but this is how animations are done, and you have all the hooks that you really want. Very so nice. What we do when we make a little bit more complex pages where the page transitions are different is that we feed in some information about where we're coming from and where we're going to, and then we're trying to figure out, maybe by the route or maybe by how deep you're in or anything, we'll figure out what animation to run. So you can have complex stuff.
Nice.
So just a little bit of the gotchas before we're done. The problems we've faced, and some of them we've solved and some of them not. The initial content, I think, for SEO, Google is pretty good at running JavaScript now, so it is able to index most of the stuff that's in our SPA solutions, and it works pretty well. But the problem is that we still need to put some initial content in, so that scrapers that don't run JavaScript can have some meaningful content. So we did the most obvious at least here in Denmark, is Facebook. So we want to have it so that people can share a link on Facebook, and then the little preview that Facebook generates is actually the real page and not some generic stuff with curly braces in it. So we're actually, that's why, as René said, that's why we're actually feeding in the real title and feeding in some meta information and all that stuff in the template. It wasn't in the slides, but
okay. So when you was doing that Umbraco template, depending on, you get in the real page title, the real page meta, so that you can do it, send it on to Facebook.
Based on the route, and then we don't care about updating that, because that's not really for people to see. It's just for computers to read. Yep. So we don't update that. We don't spend any time updating that when the page changes, because we don't care. It's
client side kicks in, and then Angular application boots up.
Yeah, exactly. So if you have problems with indexing, there's a lot of services. Like there's a service called prerender.io that you can put in front of your. So it runs in front of your regular website, and that will actually see. So this is a Google bot coming. So it'll run the JavaScript on the server instead, and it'll actually feed the completed HTML down to the bot. So that so if you care about Bing or some of the other search engines that don't support JavaScript, you should go for something like that. In Denmark, it's not a problem because nobody uses anything but Google here. But I know it isn't. It's different in other countries. And then cache invalidation, as René said, is a pretty hard question. I think we figured it out with the GUIDs and stuff. I think it works pretty well. We haven't seen any problems with it, even when new templates are added and people are creating new pages and deleting them and all that stuff. It works really, really well.
Yeah, I think it was a nice way to solve the problem in terms of notifying the client whenever, new content was added or JavaScript files were changing on the server. Either by sending that GUID down the wire as a response header or just as part of the JSON request.
Yeah. So just the final gotchas. For once, like we have to handle memory management in JavaScript. I mean, traditionally, JavaScript developers have been lazy because we've just been reloading the page all the time, so we don't care about memory. But now memory leakages are actually a problem because there's never a real page reload. And if you're on a really high-powered computer, it doesn't really matter. But when you're on a first-generation iPad or something, if you don't handle memory, like the third time you click the page, you'll crash the browser for you. So we have to do this. And the way to handle it is, of course, framework specific or I mean, it's the same in all JavaScript, but like in Angular, you get hooks for when components are teared down and when controllers are teared down. You get hooks so you can hook into that and do the cleanup. So it's like if you want to use something like this, you have to pay attention to that because otherwise you'll end up with really bad user experiences. Of course, there's a JS dependency, so we can't run any of this code without.
Yeah, so I was going to bring that up. So if it's very rare these days, if a user visits the site without any JavaScript enabled, what happens? I
mean, if you the way we use them, the page just breaks. So it's a dependency.
Okay.
If you care about it, and if your users care about it, or if you have a lot of users that way, you could use the prerender.io service to serve like that serves the initial request for Google or something, some search box. You can use the same approach to actually render the HTML down and send it down. And since all the links are real links with real URLs in them, that would just make it so that they'll get a page refresh on every time.
So you could also render the markup and the navigation, like not styled or anything, and then when Angular takes over, the user never sees it instead of unless they don't have JavaScript activated.
Yeah, you could do something like that. And then there's just there's no unload event, so you have to handle stuff that relies on the unload event. So there is one, but it's only one, and it doesn't fire every time there's a new page. So like for analytics or something, you have to handle that yourself and send.
Yeah, so you have to send those events. So there is no page click. So every time you're transitioning between a page or state, you're having to send that to, say, Google Analytics or whatever analytics application.
Yeah. So the one problem we've had that we haven't really come up with a solution for is when anything requires document.write. Document.write has been a bad practice for years and years in JavaScript. So, like, fortunately, it's not a big problem. But we've come into an issue with with the old captcha from Google. It used document.write, and it meant we couldn't use it. Of course, I mean, it's a horrible thing to even use it. But when sometimes you just rely on something that actually runs synchronously in the markup, and you cannot do it. There's no way to do that asynchronously. So that's the only problem we have that we haven't solved. So if anybody has any ideas to that,
actually, we also had a problem with the preview. Remember?
Oh yeah, we talked about how to preview pages from Umbraco because they're not published yet in the API.
Yeah, but I have found a solution. So that's next time.
Perfect.
Yes.
So
that's next time.
Yeah, we'll do that next time. So just a couple of links. We've made the front end part of this is more or less production ready and on GitHub. You can just play with it.
Awesome.
There's the grid, which is obviously just passing the grid. It's really simple. I mean, it's not really worth having a repository for it. You can just duplicate the template that I gave you. It's just more that this way we can just clone it down whenever we want to use it. But the SKU spa thing is the entire framework that we use to handle it with all the caching stuff and all the rules for intercepting 500 errors on the server and how to handle that and what happens when a page is deleted while the user is on it and all that kind of stuff. So that repository is, of course, there's still a lot of to-do comments in it and stuff, but you can play around with it, and we've used that version on many of the sites that are already live. So you should you can go ahead and play with that.
Yeah, very nice.
Yeah, and then for the backend stuff, we have made a repository with some example code because the code is not that generic that you just can install a NuGet package or something. Yep. You have to do some work yourself, but this example code should explain what to do and how to do it.
No,
but
awesome.
I'm glad to answer any questions if somebody have one or more.
Yeah, no. I have one or a suggestion. In the meantime, ever thought about creating a very simple starter kit or something similar using the SPA stuff that you guys have? So wrapping that up into a simple site to kind of learn from, basically.
That would be a good idea.
Yeah,
we haven't done that,
but we could. Yeah.
Because, it seems like you've thought so far about obviously shipping this example code. It would be nice just to show about how maybe to do a transition and how best practices in terms of doing front end and best practices from the server API end. Just a very basic site, a couple of pages or whatever. But that would be really nice.
Yeah.
But we also share code, so like if you want to see some of the source of how we've done animations for the page we just used, you can just ping us on Twitter or something. We'll show you some code. We love sharing.
Yep.
Awesome. That's good to hear. So what was maybe we should take there was a couple of more links to other sites at the end. I noticed. Should we just take a quick look at them? So is all of these sites built on the same kind of idea of this generic-ish SPA client side and this kind of same server response for all the sites that you're doing SPA-wise?
I didn't get the question.
Okay, so are you using the same kind of principles for all of these SPA sites that you're building?
Yeah. Okay. So the main approach is the same. But of course, there's some implementation details that are different.
Yeah.
But the main approach or philosophy is the same. So here again, you see just a regular page, and then whenever you change, you actually get a nice animation, and you're at the top again. And it's
and actually, this one has, instead of when you search the site, you get a result page. If you do a SPA, it's quite easy to make the result on the page. So if I search for robots, for example. You get the results just here, and then you can go.
And you can see how we can get really nice animations. So so otherwise you would have no idea how to know if you're going from the search overlay to a new page or you're just clicking a link to the new page. Yeah. But since we have the context and we know everything you're doing, we can just you know, take advantage of that knowledge and give you a really nice an experience.
Here's actually an example. when the client started editing and put in content on the site, there were no transactions or no animations between the pages. And then afterwards, we put them on, and actually the client went back and said, our page
well, how come our page is so slow
so slowly right now? Actually, it wasn't, but
there's a kick in the balls.
Yeah. So now we're back to just having a spinner up the corner when we click on the new page.
Okay, so it's...
But so this is actually like a spa thing, but you see, we still get the nice scroll to the top and all that stuff while the page is loading. But it is... I liked it better when there was a page animation, but they didn't.
Not even if you shaved off like a few milliseconds or half a minute, like half a second or something. Was the transition really long? Or
I know our art director. I imagine he's tried everything to get them to accept any kind of animation, and they probably wouldn't.
Yeah, awesome. So apart from, so what was that service that you talked about, Fillip?
It's called prerender.io.
Prerender, okay. I've never heard of it. So that literally crawls your site, so to speak, and fetches the pure HTML?
Yeah, it doesn't do anything. Yeah, it more or less just runs your JavaScript on their server and then takes the initial DOM when it thinks it's done and there's no more events going on. It'll take that DOM and parse it back to HTML and it'll actually send that down the wire.
Okay.
So it's a pretty nice thing. It's a server. It's a soft a service that you just. I think it's actually free until you have a lot of requests. But you can also host it yourself. I've seen a lot of examples on that. But like there's node modules for running something like Chrome in the background without a view, and it will actually do all the stuff for you. But pre-render is just pretty easy because you don't have to do a lot of things. It just works out of the box.
It's like US,
Yeah, this works.
Yeah,
awesome. So is there any kind of other considerations or gotchas you would kind of advise people on if they're going to build a spa app using Umbraco?
I think we've faced most of the problems. It's a lot of fun. It takes, of course, like anything else, it takes a little extra time the first time because you have to learn how it's done and where the cutoff between back end and front end is now. But it makes it easier, and it's I like when you're not tightly coupled between the back end and the front end. So this way
you get things done a lot faster.
Yeah, and if you choose to fire me and you want to run React or something, you can just rewrite the front end and you don't have to change anything about the back end. And I wouldn't say it now, but if we wanted a different CMS, you can just change the back end and run exactly the same front end. So
yeah, you could.
I like it when it's not coupled strongly between the front and the back end. So there's just if you wanted to scale this, you could have one content box serving Umbraco, and then you could have something in the middle that you could scale like crazy, that you could handle all the caching for all the API requests.
You can also do some. Actually, we tried it on a new solution. We could also do caching on the API calls.
Yep. Okay.
So that'll be even faster if you wanted to, and that would be quite easy.
Yeah, that's a nice, quite easy win. But yeah, like you say, it's quite nice so they're not tightly coupled together. That you can, one is not dependent on the other. It's just sending JSON down the wire.
Yeah.
So yeah, like you said, if you want to swap out the front end at a later date, can do. If you want to swap out the architecture and the back end, you can do. Awesome. But there would be no other reason to not use Umbraco.
No.
Umbraco's awesome.
I can think of no reason.
Okay, I don't think, I'm just going to check Twitter and check a couple other places just to make sure no questions have come in and I've not spotted them. I think actually we don't have any, which is good. Which normally means the demo is very, very thorough and very, very good.
Or maybe just nobody watched it.
There's 10 people watching now. But yeah, no, thank you so much for your time, and it was a great demo, and I look forward to skimming through that code base later.
Perfect. Thanks for having us.
Yeah. Thanks. Have a lovely afternoon, and I'll speak to you soon.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye. Bye.